everyone. I'm Yasmin. I'm really delighted to be speaking here at the BBC Tech Meetup. So thanks to the BBC guys for having me as well. Today I wanted to give basically an overview of how you can switch careers to product. So just a little bit about myself. I started a relatively small company at university. This was a student magazine. My university ran a business plan competition and gave about 5 to 10 business grants to different people in the university, and luckily I was one of them. So I ran this company for about a year. It was very much nothing to do with tech, nothing to do with digital, and so after a bit of, I guess, reflection time, I decided that actually I wanted to transition into tech startups. The reason being I wanted to understand how to grow a scalable company, and with that meant, the best way of doing that was to go into tech. So I've worked in a variety of roles, operations roles and strategy roles, with a little bit of marketing here and there as well. And in the last couple of years, I've, I guess, made the transition into a product role as well. So currently I'm a product owner for Revolut, and on top of that, I'm an advocate for women in tech and blog for my own blog, which is called The Startup Girl. And that's where I talk a little bit about my startup experiences and what I think it's like working in tech. And I guess my main mission with that is to allow people to understand that you can have a really fruitful career working in startups. So in terms of the agenda, essentially what I wanted to go through today is, what does it mean to work in product? What are the skills that are required to be working in product? How, and I think this is really important, so how do you demonstrate the skills that are required to be working in a product role? I'm going to discuss a few ways that you can switch into product, and I thought it would be quite nice to also look at successful profiles of people who've also switched into product. And at the end, if I get the time, I'll go through a resources list, but I hope that maybe the event can also share the slides at the end if we don't get to that as well. Just a little bit of a few pointers as I go through. I will mainly be focusing on the skills required for a product manager role. The reason being is I feel that product manager is quite a popular role, and it also encompasses quite a lot of the other product roles that you have in organizations. And I hope that by the end of this session, you will realize that virtually anyone can transition into a product role. There rarely is a very strict path that is laid out. For example, it's not common to go into, let's say, a product internship as soon as you've graduated and work your way up to, let's say, head of product. That's never really the common route. And so actually most, at least people that I've come across as well, have fell into product by working in other roles previously. So I hope that shows that basically anyone can get into product if they really want to. So I wanted to start with the skills that I think are relevant to working in product. And I'll go through each of them one by one. So firstly, and this is at the core of everything, you need to be able to understand the people's problems, and mainly your users, actually. So product always starts at understanding what your core user problems are, what are their requirements. And I place a lot of importance on this because you can't successfully carry out your role without having a full understanding of this as well. And so the soft skill that comes along with this, that is 100% required, is empathy. So can you stand in the shoes of your users and understand why they might be interested in using your product, why they might not be interested in using your product, and how do you allow that to help you in the product decisions that you take in your role as well. Secondly, driving business growth. So all the time as a product person, you should be questioning, is what you're working on affecting a key KPI or OKR? If you don't know what those are, those are essentially targets that either have been set by yourself or the product team or the company. I think it's very easy as a product person to work on things that can potentially help maybe your team members or help create efficiency, but aren't necessarily driving growth for your users or for the business. So a key, I guess you could say, as a soft skill here is the ability to learn to say no to people as well. Product is one of those roles where you definitely can't please everyone at the same time. But the one core set of users that you should be pleasing are your users. So who are the people that have signed up to your product, who are using it daily, who are the ones that are bringing you any revenue? Thirdly, you need to be able to work closely with a variety of people. So you'll be communicating with stakeholders during the entire journey of your role. And actually, this is something that I realized very quickly as a product person. You need to be pulling in other stakeholders at different points of your journey, maybe sometimes on a consultative basis, and other times you want to involve them in the whole decision-making process as well, whether that's someone from marketing, sales, customer support, the CEO, potentially CTO, obviously your line manager, anyone that's in the product team that you're working in as well. That's definitely a skill that you definitely need to hone in on as well. Fourthly, developing a strategy. So you need to be able to understand what your customer wants and figure out whether your proposed product decision is actually viable from a business point of view. And so this is where maybe you are running a business model or potentially even a P&L as well, so a profit and loss account. And another great skill is execution. So can you get stuff done? Can you do it quickly? And this is a key skill that I think is often ignored and underestimated, but can definitely help you in your journey to being really great in product as well. Some additional skills, so leading a team through influence and not authority. What I mean by that is often when you are a product person, or even especially if you're a product manager, you don't necessarily have line management responsibilities of everyone in your team. And often the people in your team will be developers, designers, user researchers, but you're not necessarily their manager. So how do you influence them? How do you motivate them? How do you align them with your mission when you don't necessarily get to make decisions like their promotions, or whether you put them on a performance improvement plan, or how well they're doing in their day-to-day job? So that's a really tough one to balance. And the rest, so communicating often and broadly, like I mentioned previously, you'll be working with a lot of stakeholders. And so how do you balance that? How do you manage your communication? And your communication routes and channels are going to be different for all the different stakeholders that you're talking to as well. I mentioned this briefly earlier, so making decisions. So when you will have lots of different people that are requesting things from you in terms of product, and where I've mentioned that you need to be able to say no, that also means, being able to make decisions and go ahead with it. There's often a term that we use in product, which is disagree and commit. So collectively, it's very unlikely that your entire team is going to be on board with what you've proposed as a product decision, but can you make it so that everyone on the team will, for those that don't agree, will they disagree and commit and still align towards the mission? And lastly, the last two, so being able to create amazing experiences for people. And usually these are your users. You want them to be coming back to your product. You don't want to lose them. You need to keep retention. So that is where I've kind of put this, as a product person, you're at the intersection of UX, tech, and business. And so that's where the UX element and side comes into things as well. And lastly, being organized, detail-oriented, and prepared. So you will be having a lot of conversations, and you need to be able to back up the decisions that you've made, often with data, often with user research as well. But that means that you, as well as being super execution focused, do you have the kind of preparedness and the background of being organized as well? So from a day-to-day involvement as well, I would say there's 5 elements that I've picked out as to what a good product person will include in their role. So firstly, data. So can you get insights into your customer actions and problems? And this might mean, you might have a data analyst on your team, you might not. So depending on the type of company you work for, you might be expected to be able to pull queries together, and that's often using a tool like SQL. And basically being able to understand where the data tells you that you have gaps, maybe users that are falling off your funnel. And you definitely need to be able to have the analytics aspect. So can you take data and be able to infer from it? Can you infer, okay, maybe 30% of our users are from the UK and 20% of these are from London, and they churn because of X, whatever that might be. You need to be able to infer the data as well. Secondly, speaking to customers. Again, like I said, this is a real fundamental. So if this is not something that you're comfortable with, I would really question whether a product is right for you. But essentially, you need to be able to develop user personas, carry out user research yourself, and getting to the core of your customer needs as well. Thirdly, marketing and sales. So are you coordinating with the other teams in your company? It's very rare that the product person has to actually carry out the marketing channels and the sales strategy, but you do definitely need to be able to work alongside them extremely well to understand, how well is your product being adopted? What are some of the reasons that your users might be churning or not actually using the product? And whether those are marketing or sales tweaks that need to be made. So you need to be able to be influential in that respect as well. Operations, so this goes on from what I was just saying. So how are you cooperating with all the other teams that are connected to your product? I've mentioned marketing and sales because those are the two often most popular ones that you'll be working with, but it really depends on the type of product that you're working on as well. You might be liaising with support, you might be liaising with finance. There really is no, there's no team that you won't be working with. So are you the kind of person that can bring all other teams together? And that really requires you to be a people person as well. And lastly, technical skills. So how are you developing your product? And do you understand what they're building? And are you able to run your development team on a daily and weekly basis as well? Just to caveat all of this as well, it's not that you need to have all 5 of these areas as well. I personally would say I'm quite good at 3 to 4 of these, and it's never really a requirement that you have all of them in a job description either. But what I would say is hopefully by the end of this, you can say, okay, I know that I'm good at these areas. These are the areas that I'm not so good at, and these are the ones that I need to upskill in as well. So for me, it certainly is the technical area where I'm not incredibly versed in, and so to make sure that I'm taking an online course in HTML and CSS, as well as other technologies as well, to make sure that I do have an understanding of that as well. So I wanted to put together some potential routes to product roles depending on what your current role or background is. And I would say, again, this is not an exhaustive list. I haven't put absolutely every single role that exists out there. But I would say, if you're looking at this and you're trying to figure out what sort of product role you should be going for, look at your background, look at what skills you have already, and then also look at what skills you need to learn. If you are in marketing, it's very easy to actually transition into a product marketing route, get really good at that, and then make the next transition to being a product manager. And I would say the same goes for all of these roles. If you're in data analytics, there's a hell of a lot of data product manager roles or product analyst roles where you support a product manager in terms of the insights of your customers and consumers. And if you do have a technical background, that's absolutely great. It's often that you might need to work on the kind of people aspect of leading a team and being able to understand the user needs more. But there's a hell of a lot of technical product manager roles out there, and they're often paid a little bit more than just your usual commercial product manager roles too. And lastly, if you're from an operations or customer service background, again, you're probably really good at being able to bring teams together, organization, understanding what the user problems are. Especially if you're in customer service, you'll understand where things aren't going well, where customers are complaining. And so this is where you can potentially transition into like a product associate or product manager role as well. So let's say you have those skills, you've realized what your background is, you've realized what areas you need to upskill in. What can you do here and now? What could you do if I was to tell you tomorrow, you've set yourself a 3-month goal of getting into your perfect product position. So let's say you're in a company, let's even say, for argument's sake, you're working for the BBC. I think that there's 4 things that you can do as any employee can do when they're in an existing role. So firstly is being able to speak to users. Hopefully you have maybe in the company that you work in a user feedback channel, so where you can see where people have complained. For us at Revolut, we often look at the Trustpilot reviews that we receive, and then I take it upon myself to follow up with any reviews that I consider potentially to not be that very good, to understand where the user had a bad experience as well. Even if you don't necessarily have the ability or your company doesn't let you potentially speak to users, really good to keep an eye on public reviews of why these users have had a negative experience, let's say. Secondly, QA. So in the build process, essentially your developers or your engineers, I use them interchangeably, but the people that build your code will have a stage before they release to the public, before you release to your users, of QA, so quality testing essentially. So I've always done this in any of the jobs, and this is actually how I first got into product myself. Was basically by saying, can I assist with testing on QA? And this is great because you'll rarely ever find that people say no to this. They always need help with being able to find bugs. And so there's two things that you'll learn. You'll learn the user experience and the user interactions that people go through when they go through, let's say it's an app. And you'll also be able to pick out bugs. And that's a really key part of also, sorry for the noise, being in product too. So definitely would encourage you to do this. If you have existing product managers or product people in the company, one way to get recognized is to offer ideas to them in terms of what you think users could do with. In terms of, let's say, you have a great idea that you think users want to refer other people, and that'd be a great way to acquire more users as well to your platform. I would take this to the next level though, and build a business case for it as well. A good way of doing this is potentially doing benefit cost modeling. If you're not familiar with this, then I would make sure, again, it's an area that you upskill in or ask someone who does do it. Basically, you want a way to stand out, and this is one way of doing it as well. And lastly, if you work in squads or potentially cross-functional teams as well, potentially ask or offer yourself to be involved in a shadowing basis in terms of feature prioritization. And so what I mean by this is that as a product manager, so for me, I'll often get my team together bi-weekly and we'll go through ideation. So what do we think are the next things that we should be building? I'm usually more than happy to have people come in to those sessions, either on a basis to consult and say, from a marketing perspective, this is what's going wrong, so can we build for this? Or you can just offer to shadow. So maybe you're not even offering any ideas, but you're just doing it to understand the process that people go through as well. Let's say you can't, for whatever reason, you don't want to, or you can't demonstrate the skills that you have in the existing company. I wouldn't stop there. There are definitely things that you can do outside of the company you work in as well. So one being that you can shadow someone who works in product. I think as in our climate today, we're often told to find a mentor, but I would go one step further and find a product person who is in the exact position that you want them to be, that you want to be in yourself, who may be willing to offer some time to talk you through maybe the products that they're working on and the areas that they're trying to develop as well. So this will help you understand areas that you may need to develop, and also areas within product that you like or dislike as well. Also start your own mini project. So for example, try to develop your own product. It can be really small. An example might be a blog. Just make sure that you take the product methodology with you. And that way you also have like a personal portfolio that you can show when you are potentially looking for your next job as well. Learning through online content, there's so much out there that's free and paid. I've actually included in the resources list a bunch of, I guess, product organizations that are definitely well recognized. So that's definitely one route to upskilling yourself in product to help you get your next role. And get involved in user research interviews as well. So what I mean by this is often as a product manager, I am talking to users who I know have potentially used the product and haven't had a good experience. Rather than being the person who's asking the questions, you can also be the recipient of these questions as well. One, I guess, cheat way to do this is to sign up to a bunch of different tools. For me, recently I've done it with ClassPass. What I do is I sign up and I deliberately don't use the product, because then what will happen is I end up in what's called a churn list. So users that signed up but churned instantly. And those are typically the users that product managers want to speak to the most. And so what you'll find is potentially they often reach out to you saying, hey, can I ask you for your feedback on why you didn't sign up? And this will get you a really good basis of what questions are asked during these interviews as well. And lastly, learn about product methodologies. There's so much out there. It's really important that you understand agile methodology. I've also listed some product feature methodologies as well. And these will be asked in potentially your product interviews as well. So definitely make sure that you place some prioritization on that. So in terms of routes to switching to product, I think firstly, it's always easier to internally move within a company. And this is something that I did as well. So I went from an operations role straight to a product manager role. And that way it's good because everyone knows and understands that you've had a different background and that you're new in this. So you will often get a lot of support as well. Another route is to find a junior product associate position or product manager position within a larger company. This is always good because you'll have mentorship from different levels above you as well. Thirdly, joining a startup that has a burning need. Often they do need product managers, but they also need a product manager who has a mix of being able to do anything and everything. I would say caveat that with is that you might not get that much coaching or mentoring if you do join a startup. And lastly, you could potentially start your own company. That's a great way of understanding the product methodology and how to build a company yourself. So lastly, I just wanted to go through some examples. Jana Basto, she is the CEO of ProdPad and Mind the Product. She actually started off in a small graphic design studio doing kind of artwork essentially, and then managed to land a job in a junior PM role from previously being in a support and account representative as well. Simon Cast, so he actually started off in the army and landed a role as an analyst for a consultancy, which he took charge of. So I guess in a way he fell into product management without necessarily the title being there. And I do find that that happens quite often as well. When I look back at some of my past jobs that I was doing, even though I was in operations, half of my role was product. I just never really had the acknowledgement that what I was doing was product as well. So also look at what you're doing in your day-to-day job. Is it any of the things that I previously mentioned? And often you probably will find that you are doing elements of product already. And lastly, Paul Malon. So Paul looked after a CRM system and associated databases for some time. And he basically, again, a little bit like me, worked for a startup and dabbled in a bit of everything. So I think there's hundreds of people that are out there. They never just ended up in product by virtue of doing an internship in product and then working their way up. It's always that you tend to kind of land in product from a different role. And it's great to be able to use your skills that you've had from previous roles as well. So I hope that really gives an insight into the fact that pretty much anyone can transition into a product role as well. I'll quickly run through these. These are resources in terms of product specifically that you might want to read upon, blogs as well. The thing that I wanted to mention is that there are tons of communities that are out there as well. Mind the Product and Product School are very good for people who are looking to transition into product. They have a whole community for people that are potentially, interviewing for new product roles. And so you can ask the community, what can I do here? What can I do to demonstrate this skill? This is a particular task that I've been asked to do. What should I do? So I definitely encourage you to join these groups. They're all free. You just have to sign up to them as well. And in terms of formal product training, I would recommend 3 places. So one being General Assembly, the other being Mind the Product, and Product School. So I hope that this has helped. If you've got any specific questions, also feel free to ask me now. Also check out my product blogs, which I do on my own website as well. Yeah, thank you very much.